Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Thibault, and I'm really excited to talk to you about scaling your organization. I will touch on hiring a little bit, but I have some other pieces that I'm going to dive into. And so I'm visiting here from San Francisco. I hope I can bring my spouse next time. She had to stay home with the puppy and to work. This is not a school break. All right, so a little bit about me. I spent the first 10 years of my career in higher education administration, wearing any and all hats. I'm a builder and problem solver by default. And so I didn't really realize that until I was later on in my career. And I looked back at why I changed jobs every 18 to 24 months and said, because I came in, built something, fixed something. I said, okay, where's my next challenge? And no, just keep running the thing. And I'm like, yeah, that's not interesting to me. So what can I do next? I have been the person who was the first in the role, the first in the department, and really built it out. So then I decided that I wanted to be more intellectually stimulated than I was being working in education administration, and I switched to tech, and I got to work with engineers, and I was like, I don't know how to code, but this stuff is so fun. I don't want to do it, but I want to talk about it. And I got to work with engineering product design as their learning and development partner, build onboarding for them, build learning and development for them. And then sadly, COVID hit. And so I was impacted, as was 75% of my team. And so I took a stint as a property manager, managing some student housing at UC Berkeley. And then I sort of fell into the role that I'm in. I became really good friends with a security engineer when I was in L&D because I have that risk management hat. What's the worst thing that can happen? Let's try to prevent that. Let's plan for if it does happen. So we're proactive and we don't have to be too reactive, but we have the tools if we need to be. And then also, what's the best possible outcome and how can we aim for that? So anyways, he said, hey, I co-founded this conference focused on gender diversity and cybersecurity. I think you should apply to be the program manager and help us take the conference from an in-person event to a virtual event. So I joined part-time while being the property manager. I can tell you it wasn't actually part-time, but it was COVID, so what else did I have to do? And then I got offered a full-time job with the nonprofit. So I have been there since January 2021. That's what I'm doing now. I also am running a scholarship program that's focused on cybersecurity certifications, and that's the other big thing that we're doing. I do want to say that I know how much work running a conference is, and so I want to give props out to everyone who's been a part of this conference because it is hours, it is emotional labor, and yes, you're proud of the work, but I hope everybody gets to go home and sleep next week. The other thing I do is I am the regional lead for OpenUK San Francisco Bay Area. So OpenUK is a global organization with over 40 chapters, including one here in London. I've met your chapter head. He's amazing. And the Bay Area, if you're not familiar, has South Bay and Peninsula, which is like Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Sunnyvale, San Jose. There's the East Bay, which is Oakland and beyond. That's where I actually live. There's San Francisco City, and then there's the North Bay, which is like wine country, Napa, Sonoma, Marin County. But anyways, OpenUK San Francisco, when I joined, was very focused on San Francisco as the city and really no one else. So we've been working on, I guess I took on building and my volunteering as well because we're expanding the teams, and so I'm bringing on new volunteers for the different regions so we can program to build the community all across the Bay Area and not just in San Francisco itself. And so I've moved from SF chapter head to the Bay Area region head, and that's a volunteering thing. It's a few hours a week. So it sounds way bigger than it is, but anyways, so I love public speaking, and I don't like to be the one talking all the time. So if you want to grab the QR code or put in the menti.com and then use the code up there, I'd love to know who's in the room. Also, working with cybersecurity professionals, I understand when people don't want to scan QR codes that you don't know what they are. Okay, I see a couple people. Awesome. I love it. I would say that right now I work at a startup, but I would also be an aspiring founder. I would say choose whichever one is most relevant for you. So if I were to be here, I would choose work at a startup versus aspiring founder. So Awesome. Alrighty, so thank you so much for sharing that. I'm excited to see we have people from all across, and I hope that you all get to take away something and learn something new. Well, we all have different reasons for attending, and I decided to do this presentation because I've spent the past almost 3 years trying to build an organization. I'm the only paid employee, but I'm not the founder. So I think that's a really important distinction because I'm kind of like, sometimes I call myself the chief of staff to the founder, because while I have ability to implement strategy and to make some decisions, ultimately the founder and I work together and I make it happen. But I may not be the one that's coming out and saying this is what we're doing for the next quarter, 6 months, year. So there's not that same authority. The other thing I want to expectation set is I've never been through a venture capital fundraise, so I'm not going to talk about that. I do fundraising as part of my job, but it's nonprofit and it's different, and so I don't like to speak about things that I don't know. I'm also the only employee, so I wear any and all the hats. We have had an extra employee and lost, and I'm going to tell that story in a little bit. And then one article I read in my preparation defined scaling as exponential growth, and I define, for the sake of this presentation, I have scaling and growth as interchangeable. It's not necessarily exponential, it's just growing. And then to inform myself, just to kind of give you all, so I'm an academic by trade in the beginning part of my career, so I read a lot. So this presentation is informed by my own experiences, by research, and then also I'm a part of a community called Ask a Chief of Staff, and I ask these chiefs of staffs, hey, who's been through helping an organization scale, and what tips do you have? So I have some suggestions from them as well. All right. Sorry, I have a lot of notes on this next one. There's several components when I was doing my research. I kind of compiled all these different components to scale that different individuals suggested. I will tell you the articles that I used are at the end of the presentation, and I have uploaded it to the Sketch. So I will upload the updated deck, but it's in there. So the first one is to evaluate plan and structure. And so thinking about how do you intend to grow? What's your market? What are your values, your company values? What will you need as you grow? Your needs should include understanding your tools, production capabilities, financing and understanding the financing associated with that growth. So you need to plan out the speed of your growth and the scope. You need to look at the market. Timing's really important. Maybe you have you have 2 things you want to grow, areas you want to grow in. It doesn't make sense to pursue both of them, pursue only one. Where does it fit in the market? And then, so you want to make sure you choose the best one. And that's part of why I brought on volunteers, because I realized there were areas in which I wanted to grow. There were areas where the founder wanted us to grow or wants us to grow, and I couldn't do it as one person. And I don't have the funding to bring on paid team members. So I brought on some volunteers to really help me grow. And I know depending what product you're working with, if you're doing open source and you're don't have a revenue source necessarily, volunteers could be really crucial to your success. One of the chief of staffs I talked to said that creating playbooks is really important. If you don't have them, build them because you will need them. Because when you're in the midst of it, and you're what's the roadmap we're gonna follow? Oh, let's reference this. Another one said that data and metrics are so important because you need to inform your decisions based on data metrics. That'll help you know if you're on track, especially if you do have a board or investors that you're reporting to, being able to show that. What does growth look like? And then finally, another chief of staff said, plan for failure. When you scale, everything breaks. That's people, that's revenue, that's process. Just plan for it. I think he said, if you plan for it, that'll be helpful. Anticipate it, plan for it, and just expect it to happen. And that's not bad. It's just when you try to grow something, it's got to change. The next thing is that you need to think about your people. And so who is on, so there's two sections. There's team members, and then there's customers. So let's start with team members. You need to think about what roles do you want to add to your organization? How are they going to be compensated, and at what level? If you're hiring, should they be a full-time employee? Should they be a contractor or a fractional hire? So I'm from the US, like I said. I might ask whether it's a W-2 employee, which would mean like full-time contract employer takes care of their side of the income taxes. Or are you self-employed or a freelancer that you contract with someone? And then that person would be responsible for both sides of income taxes. At least that's how it works in the US. And then a fractional hire, if you aren't familiar, usually that's an independent, self-employed person who takes on part-time roles. So you might be bringing someone in for they have expertise in a certain area, but it's only part-time and they're not committing to you full-time. And a lot of people who do that really love it because they get a lot of flexibility and they can work with a couple of organizations and really do what works for them. Usually that's a shorter term hire, although I've seen people go from fractional and then the company's like, please stay with us, or it's a longer term engagement, depending on what both people need. And then aside from the type of team member that you're bringing on, there's some alignment that's crucial. You want to really make sure that they're buying into your values. As you're growing, growth can be really stressful. It takes a lot of energy and time, and so you really want to make people are bought into what you're working on and that they're promoting what you want them to promote. So make sure that your team members connect to the values. Do they believe in what you're building? And that's especially crucial when we're talking about your leadership. Your leadership sets the tone, so that's especially important for them. Next is customers. And so I've shared, these are user personas that I created based on who our people are that are engaged in our community. So they're community members, so essentially they're kind of my customers. And I know they're small. And we actually have 5 of them, but that would have been too many. So basically, for us, there's the user persona that's a new to cyber person, entry level, so someone who's looking to get into the cybersecurity industry. They could be a new grad, a boot camp grad, or somebody who's an industry changer. The user persona is a cybersecurity professional who's network building, who's not interested in job searching. And then the other one I shared is a senior cybersecurity professional who's job searching. And so just knowing what are their pain points, right? Because that's what you're trying to solve with your customers is we're trying to grow, we need to make sure we're solving our customers' pain points. And so when you do personas, you do user interviews and user research, then you can inform these and say, okay, here's our metric, here's our goal, the direction that we want to go. And so I find these to be really helpful. And then I also have user personas for the conference that I run that are focused on the technical talks. So to which technical level are you? And so we use that for determining difficulty of if we're saying this talk would be relevant to security engineers versus this talk would be relevant to someone who's interested in cybersecurity. Because they have different knowledge bases. All right, so thinking about components to scale. The next one also is funding. So how are you going to financially support your growth? And can you bootstrap your expenses, or do you need to raise funds? Do you have a product or a service to sell? And if so, what are your sales goals to achieve growth? And that may be, hey, we haven't sold anything yet, but we're going to try and figure out how to raise revenue through sales. I think about ChatGPT, right? It was free for everyone, and then they added a paid tier, especially when enterprise was like, we need more security standards here. So they started charging for that. Figuring out the money piece is really, really important because there's very little we can do without additional funding. And even in a nonprofit, our goal isn't to have profit, but we still need money to operate. We still need money to grow and scale. And so the other thing is with production. So you want to think about that you align your funding with the commitments that you make to your customers, and making sure that you have those together, because you don't want to overpromise to your customers. You could certainly underpromise and overdeliver, but you certainly don't want to overpromise and then be in a place where you have to backtrack. And the same thing is true with hiring. So making sure funding is in place to determine your hiring needs, if you're going to be able to do that. Because the other thing, I was talking with one of the other suggestions I got from somebody was he said that his company, they scaled too fast. They didn't see the warning signs, or they didn't listen to their team members when they gave them warning signs that they were scaling too fast. And now they're in a place where they didn't stop and backtrack, and now they're gonna have to lay off like 30% because they grew too fast, they didn't get things in alignment. And then also the negative impact was their people didn't feel heard when they were like, we tried to warn you, we tried to tell you like this was too much, too fast. And now some of those folks, so that's gonna really like have a detriment to their company on several levels. So that goes back to the evaluating and planning at the same time, but also like making sure the funding is in alignment. And then technology and tools. So what technology and tools do you need to be successful? And are you using them to your full extent? So for a short stint, I was an implementation specialist. So when you bought the software, I helped you onboard it to your team or to your organization. So I worked with the IT folks, I worked with the onboarding team. And what I found a lot of time, and the interesting thing was I had been a user of this software and I didn't know that there were so many different things that we could have been doing with it that we weren't. And so, and then when I saw the back end of it, I was like, wow, there's all these different portals that you could have been using that would make the experience better. So understanding your software and tools and using them to their fullest capabilities, assuming that they make sense for you. One of the tools I use, these are, two are tools we use and one's aspirational for us, but I use HubSpot, and that's how we manage our CRM and our communications and all that. We just started tracking donors in the sales aspect of it, and so I hadn't been doing that. And it was something that we had access to, and I just wasn't using it. There's also other components of HubSpot that I could be using that I haven't spent the time to study and know and see if they would be impactful for us. Like I haven't sent A/B testing emails to see which ones land better because I'm just trying to get the emails out. So especially if you can find time or capacity to use the tools that you have and really maximize what you're paying for, because I'm not saying buy additional pieces, I'm just saying use what you have. When we raise more money, I'm gonna get a paid Zoom account. Right now we use Google Meet or like a limited Zoom, and so I'm excited to add that because I think that will really help us. And then another one we use is Google Workspace, and I've been working to like make sure we really maximize the package that we have. And so the next thing is, if you produce a product, I'm going to tell a little story next, is that if you produce a product, can your production tools handle this increased growth? So, I'm talking about maximizing the tools that you have, but also making sure that they match what you want to do. So for example, we have HubSpot, we had the bigger package. I wasn't using it all. There's some pieces I missed when I downgraded us, but I was looking at our budget versus our expense, like what we were bringing in versus what we were spending and what I was using, and I said, we just don't need this higher package. And so it took us down a notch. Now, should we be like really good cash flow and we're growing, I'm gonna expand us back up because there's some things that I miss. But for now, that worked. And then you wanna make sure, like I said, that you can align your customer promises with your production. So let's talk about a fun little thing. I will tell you, I'm not really an American football fan, but I grew up in a family of Detroit Lions fans, and now I live in San Francisco. So if you follow, last weekend was a little complicated. I live by the San Francisco 49ers, and my dad was rooting for the Detroit Lions, and the Lions lost. Thank you. So anyways, the San Francisco 49ers are going to the Super Bowl this coming weekend. And you may or may not be excited about that, that's okay. But on a football note, if you follow American football or Taylor Swift, I don't know if you're a Chiefs fan or just not a 49ers fan. Taylor Swift is dating a football player named Travis Kelce who plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. Did I know who Travis Kelce was before Taylor Swift started dating him? No. But anyways, So Taylor, the phenomenon that she is and the cultural influencer that she is, she wore this jacket made by Kristen J, I don't know how to say her last name, who happens to be married to a San Francisco 49ers player, but she does these custom jackets based on the letters. Well, once Taylor Swift wore it, then it became this whole thing, and Kristen's brand blew up. In fact, NFL just gave her permission. She just got a licensing agreement to actually use NFL logos officially. So I share this story because if we're talking about production and demand, the question is she going to keep making handmade jackets and just have a really high price for them with a very limited quantity? Or is she going to change her production method and then have to figure out, one, how to meet the demand, but also how will she adjust for, is the quality going to change? Are her expenses going to change? How's she going to manage all that? So that will be something that she has to figure out, but you want to align customer demand with production while still maintaining the product that you provide. So good luck to her with figuring that out, and happy money income. The freemium model. I don't know, I'm not going over to sew. You don't want me to sew anything. So like I mentioned, I'm an insatiable learner, and I've researched this topic a ton, but okay, I already said that earlier on. Anyways, so I lead a nonprofit, which is focused on diversity and cybersecurity, and there are, so our funding and product may look different than, open source, but there are overlaps. When I joined, we produced a conference, and I took that conference from in-person to virtual, like I said, but once I started full-time, the founders started negotiating with a security training group to provide certifications. And so we cover the cost of the training for participants, and of the initial cohort of 10 people, 8 completed it, which I think is a pretty good return when you're talking about 2 intense courses, because life happens. So I accepted this job as an opportunity to grow my skills, grow an organization. I actually, running the conference is fine, but I took the job because I really wanted the opportunity to lead an organization. And my goal was, and it continues to be, to eventually have the funding to hire someone to be the program manager for the conference, but currently I still run it. All right, so in mid-2021, I was optimistic about fundraising, created an aspirational budget, and it was based on our fundraising goals, and I got permission to hire a program coordinator who would do graphics, social media, and eventually take over the conference from me, or at least parts of it. Social media was an area that I just didn't love doing, and I knew there were people who were really strong in SEO and analytics, and I wouldn't have to learn that if they came in and did it. So I was like, this is kind of a checklist item for me. I do it because I have to, but not because I really enjoy it. So let me bring in someone to take this on. And also, this is a really good role that I can hire a new grad, and they'll be excellent at it. So a few things happened with my plans and goals that changed, and I want to share a little bit about that. So I hired someone who I still believe was absolutely the right hire to work with me in the role that I hired her for. But I hired her, and then our founder lost her social media person. So my founder is the founder of my company, but she's also the founder and CEO of another company. So her other company lost their social media person, and basically this person came in, and then we ended up splitting her part-time for the nonprofit and part-time for the other company, which was a really complicated situation for her. And if I could go back, I probably would say, hey, maybe let's set this up differently, or let's not do this, because essentially she had 2 bosses. And my founder is a fantastic person, and our operational and management styles are very, very different. So she was getting 2 pretty different experiences. And she was brand new, it was like her first job out of college. So this was quite an experience to have. So eventually what happened is our funding wasn't coming in because the economy turned, and it was really hard to raise money. And so she moved full-time over to the other company. So I lost her from my organization, which I was really sad about. But when I look back, we always say hindsight's 2020. I don't know if that's a phrase outside of the US, but hindsight is 20/20, and I look back and I realize, like, although I think she was fantastic, I hired for the wrong role. I hired for the role that I didn't want to do versus the role that would have had a bigger impact on the organization. Fundraising is also an area that I don't have a ton of experience in. And it's really hard. Like, if you've ever done it, it's really hard. And reading things doesn't make it easier. So I look back and I'm like, okay, there are two paths I wish I would have followed. One is that I said, I'm gonna advocate for this role and I'm gonna advocate for this person to be in the development fundraising space. Because if they can come in and they can build the relationships and start bringing in money, eventually I can hire that social media graphics person and maybe a program manager for the conference too. So that was one way. The other was, maybe I could have done 2 part-time roles. So I did part-time social media graphics and part-time development fundraising. And then I just would have had to adjust my expectations because I wouldn't have had as many hours with them. The ironic piece is I ended up having my social media person part-time anyways. So that's what I would have done. The other thing is, so once I did that, then it was like, okay, the early hires are really, really crucial. Who you bring in matters. If you read anything about startups and founders, they say, your early hires are so impactful to your organization. They can make or break it. And I don't think this didn't break us. It didn't make us. It is what it is. But I think that, like, I could have made a better decision. I could have made a different decision. But of course, looking back is so much easier to say that than in the moment. So the other thing is, I realized they still have goals, we still have growth goals, and I'm still one person. So that has not changed. So that's where I brought in volunteers. And I'm really excited about, I want to be a global organization that really is in tune with the world and not just like, hey, I'm Kelly, I live in California, and I'm going to do something for you in this other country that I don't know much about. So we have someone in the room actually here who's going to help me do some webinars here in the UK and for the Europe region. And then I have another person in India who's going to make sure that we're like on the IST time zone and culturally relevant for India. So I'm really big on not trying to, like I said, with the not speaking on things I don't know, but also I've done a lot of work in DEI, and so I try to be aware of when I am ignorant or I don't know things and ask, or say, hey, I can't learn everything. Who here has that knowledge? So anyways, the volunteers, I only ask like 3 to 5 hours a week of them, if that. I try to keep it low key. If they're working on the conference, then it might be more right around conference times, but trying to be acknowledged of that they are volunteers. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's great and they show up really fantastically. Other times, not as much. Or I recently had to say to someone, like, I haven't heard from you, what's going on? They didn't reply. I followed up again, they didn't reply. So I said, okay, thanks, I'm gonna repost your role. Like, let me, I'm really sorry, but no hard feelings, life happens. And that's really how I feel about it. It's happened with my volunteering too. So the other thing is, that I want to talk about is goal alignment. So I said that I have a goal of being a diversity organization that's truly global. That's why we want to bring on other folks. And then my founder has the goal of putting 1,000 women and non-binary people through the certification program. Not necessarily this year, like over time. But that requires, I'm excited by that, and it's one of the drivers behind our fundraising because it does require money. But we need to, going back to the evaluating and planning, that needs to be a part of our evaluating and planning. And so I need to align our goals with our fundraising, with who we appoint to or bring on for our board, and we're in the process of trying to do that. And then if we bring on any team members, making sure that they're in that same space as well. And I am at my time, so I want to be mindful of that. I did have a couple more mentees. We'll skip them, so I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to know, like, what are your aspirational goals? What are your current goals? And then any advice that you would have for anyone who's scaling their organization. So I'll leave this one up real quick if you want to add any advice that you have, because I'll share this presentation, I'll share the link, and that way you can see people's answers. And then just thank you so much